So follow my actions. Heads, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Sing it if you know it. Heads, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Heads, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. What comes next? Eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Heads, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Okay, I'd like you to sit down and just cross your legs like I've done. And I'll let you know when you can uncross them later on. Just think about your feet. I'd like you to draw attention to your feet. You might be wearing a pair of new shoes for the day. They might be a bit tight, but just think about the sensations you might feel in your feet. So you may be wondering why I'm doing such trivial things. Well, I'm talking about such trivial things. Well, I'm here to draw attention to a serious health issue. An issue which affects over 200,000 people per year in the UK. 1,500 of these will develop, and I'm sorry you've just had your lunch, but I'm going to have to say it how it is. You can cover your ears if you wish, but 1,500 of these will develop sepsis and eventually die. This issue costs the NHS over £1.3 million per day. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? You may be wondering what it is. Well, I'm talking about pressure ulcers. Some of you may know what a pressure ulcer is, but it's also called a bed sore or a pressure sore. So a pressure ulcer usually starts off as a discoloration on the skin, sometimes redness or discoloration. Sometimes it will develop into a worse damage, such as a blistering, and sometimes the damage will go deeper into the tissues. So when you consider there's 4 categories, from 1 to 4, and 4 is the worst. Again, if you wish, you can cover your ears if you're a bit sensitive. But at its worst, a category 4 is when damage is right down to the bone. Sometimes the bone can become infected. And sometimes the person that's suffering from this could develop gangrene. I've said it, but that's what happens in some cases. Some people could develop sepsis and eventually die. So this brings to mind a gentleman called Bob. It wasn't his real name, but let's call him Bob. Now raise your hands if you remember a quiz show called Bullseye, with a presenter called Jim Bowen, so more than I thought. So Bob was a bit like a wizened version of Jim Bowen, a little bit thinner. So you may have gathered by now that my background is in healthcare. So for over 30 years, I was a registered nurse in the NHS. 15 of these years was as a specialist tissue viability nurse, specialising in wound care and pressure ulcer prevention. So back to Bob. So I saw him on a number of occasions. Walked into the treatment room. Walls were bare and there was a smell of disinfectant. Bob was waiting to be seen on the examination couch. I introduced myself. Hello Bob, how are you? How can I help you? Well, the podiatrist wanted me to come and see you. I've got a wound on my toe and it doesn't seem to be healing. I didn't even know I had it at first. I just took my shoes and socks off and there was a stain on my sock. And then I wondered, well, what's caused that? Oh, there's a wound on my toe. You see, Bob, when I read his notes before I saw him, he was actually a lifelong sufferer of diabetes. He was also a lifelong smoker, and his diet wasn't great either. So he had a lot of factors which were affecting his healing. So I had a look at Bob's wound on his toe. But when I looked at his wound, there was pus oozing from it. And surrounding the wound was red hot tissue. The wound was clearly infected. So anyway, I assessed the wound and I cleansed it and I gave him suitable treatment. Bob was also on antibiotics, but they weren't doing that much good really. So anyway, saw Bob again in about 6 months, entered the room. He had a serious look on his face. I realised something was wrong. When he took his shoes and socks off, where his big toe had been, there was no toe. It had been amputated due to the infection spreading up his foot, and also part of his foot had been amputated as well. Again, I gave him suitable treatment and gave him advice about blood glucose control and appropriate diet, etc. And then I didn't see him again till about 12 months later. Opened the door again, went into the treatment room. Bob was on a wheelchair. Now my instant thought was, oh, he's probably broken his leg. But then when I looked closer, where his leg had been, there was no leg. He'd had an amputation up to his knee. This time he was totally dependent on others for his care. The infection had spread up his leg, so they had to cut his lower leg off. So again, I treated the wound, and then I never did see him again. I heard that he passed away. Unfortunately, he developed sepsis, and then he eventually died. So you can see, in Bob's case, this is an extreme example of where a person has developed a wound due to pressure, in this case from a tight-fitting shoe. And because Bob had a lot of factors going against his healing, this wound just got worse, just kept breaking down, becoming infected. And this is an extreme example of where he actually passed away. So you may be wondering, what has this got to do with you? Raise your hands if you have any relatives, or you might even be a carer yourself or work in the healthcare industry. Raise your hands if you know somebody with a pressure ulcer or somebody's at risk of pressure ulcers. So you might know somebody, or your loved one might have various factors such as poor mobility, diabetes, long-term health conditions such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. They might be a bit older, they might have had a stroke, their skin might be really fragile. Sometimes steroids can make your skin really thin and prone to breakdown. But it's not only really poorly people or people with chronic health conditions that can be prone to pressure ulcers or suffer from them. It could also be fairly healthy people, say somebody who's immobilised temporarily. So take my own case, for instance. I would consider myself to be relatively healthy, fairly healthy. I had to go into hospital last year for a major operation, major abdominal surgery. I came round from the operation, looked around the room, I just didn't recognise where I was. There were patients down the side, most of them asleep. And I became aware of a sensation in my heels. They were really sore. I realised, oh, they're getting sore because I must have been on my back for hours in the theatre having the operation. I must do something about it. And then I became aware that the skin on my bottom was sore as well. I knew that was due to pressure as well. So I thought, I need to try and roll myself over. So I tried to pull myself over, but I just couldn't move because the pain was so excruciating in my abdomen. So I managed to get some pillows, managed to elevate my feet so that my heels were offloaded off the bed, so they weren't pressing against the bed. And I managed to stuff a pillow into my side and managed to roll myself over slightly because there was just nobody to help, really. Anyway, I was more comfortable and I drifted off to sleep. So you may be wondering, well, what has this got to do with the occasion, which is International Women's Day or week? And also, what has this got to do with equality and equity? Now, I don't know whether you're aware, but the 2021 census figures showed that the majority of caregivers at home are women as opposed to men. And also, for some strange reason, there's more women sufferers of pressure ulcers than men. So you can only speculate why this is. So they haven't really established the exact reason why. In addition, those who suffer from chronic health conditions or who have pressure ulcers or prone to pressure ulcers, they're already at a disadvantaged position in society anyway. So you may be wondering, how can I help today? What am I here for? Raise your hands if you remember or you've seen the advert for the FAST campaign to raise awareness of stroke. So FAST, F-A-S-T, F stands for face if there's facial weakness or drooping. A stands for arms if one or both arms is weak. S stands for speech, so the speech has been lost or it's slurred. And T, time to call for help. So much like FAST, pressure ulcer prevention also has an acronym. So you get your pen and paper ready, and it's called ASKING. So if you'd like to write down the word asking, but instead of the usual spelling, it's spelled A-S-S-K-I-N-G. So each of the letters stands for a particular action which you can carry out to prevent pressure ulcers. So A stands for assessment of risk. So do you remember I mentioned about the chronic health conditions, so lung conditions, heart conditions such as heart failure, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, people that are mobile. So just think about all these risk factors which is going to make people more at risk of pressure ulcers. And then S stands for skin inspections. Do you remember I did heads, noses, knees and, I can't even say it properly, heads, shoulders, knees and toes? Just think about the heads, shoulders, knees and toes and all the areas in between. So starting off at the toes on the feet, so you've got your toes which are quite bony, you've got your inner and outer ankles, you've got your heels which are really prominent and at risk, you've got your knees, your hips, and then the skin on your bottom at the back. So I know your bottom isn't particularly bony, but often people who have got poor mobility, they're often either sitting in the chair for prolonged periods of time or else they're lying on the back. So that's going to cause the skin to be at risk of breakdown further. And then further up, you've got your elbows. You'll notice that the skin on your elbows is really thin. Now, when people are a bit immobile, they've gone into hospital for the first time, you'll notice that sometimes they'll use their elbows to move themselves up the bed. And often it's the elbows that get missed out when people are inspecting the skin. So it's really important to check the elbows. And sometimes you can put dressings on, plasters or special dressings to protect the elbows to stop them breaking down. And then further up, you've got the shoulders, the shoulder blades, and if the spine is bony, that could break down as well. And then you've got the head. So on the head is the ears. So think about if that person's wearing hearing aids, or if they've got glasses, for instance. Raise your hands if you've ever removed some glasses and sunglasses or whatever, and you've got like a ridge on your nose. Like I had that this morning when I was driving here because it was sunny, and took glasses off, and it was really red. And also the tops of the ears as well. Just think about people who've got medical equipment on their face, such as oxygen masks or oxygen tubing. It's really important to check every few hours under this equipment that the skin isn't breaking down. You just move it slightly so that it's not going to get marked. And then you've got the back of the head. So sometimes people who are on the back for a long time, they might be recovering from an operation or they might not be able to move or whatever. Often the back of the head is missed, and sometimes it's due to the hair that's in the way. So it's important to make sure the head's turned or the person moves from side to side. So the second S is surface. So just think about the bed or the mattress that the person's lying on, the chair that they're sitting on. So the seating, the cushion, whether it's hard, whether that surface is making that skin mark, and also the stool. They might be having their legs up on the stool, so make sure that it's cushioned and that there's a nice soft cushion on it. So if you find that the person that you're caring for or your loved one is marking from anything, then it's really important to get help. Call the GP or another healthcare professional that might be involved in their care, because that person could be assessed for a piece of equipment such as a special mattress, for instance. And then keep moving. So I don't mean getting up and running around the block several times, because that's not possible in some cases, but even just, for those people who tend to sit down all day, make sure that, so make sure that they stand up several times an hour as well, and then get up and stroll about, go to the kitchen, they can get a drink, a glass of water or a cup of tea, or even go outside in the sunshine or the rain or whatever and get some fresh air. So, and then if they're sort of immobile in bed, just give them assistance. Or if it's difficult to give them assistance, then they may need care, let's say from social services. So again, inform the GP, for instance. So, you've already seen it now, and you've just had your lunch, but that's just the way it is. So again, apologies, but it's known that if the skin is damp, then it's going to be more prone to pressure ulcers. So it's really important to keep the skin clean and dry. And in some cases, if necessary, you can get special barrier creams prescribed to protect the skin from moisture due to incontinence. And also if it's a new thing or if it's problematic, it could be something that could be reversible or easily treatable. So it's really important to get help if this is a new thing or it's a problem. And then we all know that nutrition, would you agree that nutrition is really important for all aspects of our functioning, our bodily functioning and health? So nutrition is really important for skin healing and to prevent pressure ulcers. Same with hydration. It's important to keep hydrated throughout the whole day, because if the skin gets too dry, then that can mark easily. So make sure that people are getting enough carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals. Plenty of information about a healthy diet. And then last but not least, there's no point doing all these things to the person that you're caring for if they don't understand why you're doing it. It's really important to involve them in your care, and also to explain the reason why you're doing these things. Give them a leaflet, and also tell them why you're doing certain things, and then they're more likely to be able to follow instructions. And also let them know, talking about asking in another sense, let them know there's no problem in them asking for help if they need help. A lot of people get embarrassed about asking for help, which was mentioned before, and it's really important to give them permission to sort of tell you that they need help with turning, or they've got a problem with marking on their skin or whatever. We need to sort of get rid of this sort of embarrassment and let people know it's fine to say they need help. So just before our break, one thing I haven't mentioned is that I'm also an educator and trainer in pressure ulcer prevention, and all things related to wound care as well. So if you are from a healthcare organisation, such as whether it's private or NHS, then I'm happy to discuss with you any options for teaching and education, whether it's online or in person. So you can speak to me at my stand at the back. I've also got a prize draw as well. So if you put in your details, such as your name and your phone number, and put your details in the box, then you could win a box of Thornton's chocolates or a bag of toiletries, loads of toiletries, nice toiletries. So anyway, last but not least, one thing I forgot. You can uncross your legs now. So raise your hands if you've still got your legs crossed. Or until I said you could uncross them. Now, who's had to uncross them before I gave you permission? So why was that? Why did you have to uncross your legs? Yeah. Yeah. So most of us have got that protective mechanism, which is pain and discomfort. if something is going to be harmful to us, then we're going to do something about it. So in this case, it'll be discomfort and pain, maybe redness or discoloration on the skin. So that causes us to uncross our legs. So that's our protective mechanism. So just think about those people that are unable to move or don't have the ability to think about these things. So they're the people that need help, really, and advice giving. So one last thing, I'd like you to, when you're ready, to get up off your bottoms, relieve your pressure. I'm not going to ask you to do head, shoulders, knees and toes, but when you're ready, get going and moving and go over to my stand over there. Now, you don't have to do it straight away.